Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the blues, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, Dan Quinn spoke to the media today, and as he customarily does on a Wednesday, heading into a game week. This one is a little unique. They're over in Madrid. They left on Monday. They're going to be there the entire week. They've talked about how good this is going to be for team bonding, building the brotherhood back up to where it needs to be to try to help translate to the field and win games. He gave an injury update, though, and that's what I really want to start this show with, because there's a theme of today's show, and I'm going to do another video later on tonight, and it's kind of piggybacking off of this theme. But they're going to get some guys back here in the very near future. And today he gave us an update on Terry McLaurin. Chris Rodriguez is going to play this week. He's going to practice this week. So his injury was not significant. I guess we were getting blown out. Was no need to put him back out there. But he seems like he's fine and ready to go. Terry McLaurin is now going to be back on the practice field in his return to play process. So he's going to start ramping up his activity on the field, which is why they brought him to Madrid with them, because he can start those movements on the field. And now they have pretty much a 3-week window, this week, next week over the bye, and then the following week during that week lead up towards the Sunday night game off the bye against Denver to get him ready to try to play. And the same can be said for Will Harris. They have officially opened up his 21-day window. And I'm telling you, they're loading up to try to get as many guys as they can back post-bye against Denver. You could see Terry back. Noah Brown could be back in that game in week 13 against Denver. Will Harris probably is going to be back. Jaden Daniels probably is going to be back in that game. More likely than not. We can't say that for sure, right? But I know that's where they would prefer to have him back. I don't think they want him to miss that game against Denver and have Terry and Noah and all those guys back and Jaden not be able to play with them, similar to the Monday night situation. And then Terry gets hurt, and then all of a sudden Jaden comes back and now Terry's not out there. They don't want that again. So they're going to be really aiming for that week 13 date versus Denver. And they expect to get a lot of guys back. They expect to have a chance to turn this season around. I know you guys are like, what? Wait, what are you talking about, dude? I'm just telling you that this is a real thing. They haven't given up on the season. We have as fans, but they haven't, and they shouldn't. By the way, like, keep in mind, there's still 7 games left this season. They shouldn't give up, and you know, you'll get to a point where, like, literally, it's over. You can't make the playoffs. They're not there yet. Okay, they're not mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, and until that happens, we can sit here and say, hey, you should play this guy, you should play that guy. What about this young guy? What about that young guy? That's not happening, or at least the thought of it isn't even taking place until you get to a space where the season is officially done. We envision the competitive portion of the season as fans being over with because of the lack of product that they've put on the field that gives you any hope of being even competitive. However, in their mind, you tweak this thing, you tweak that thing, you do this right, you do that right, and we're like, what are you talking about? You're not a tweak here, a tweak there, a play here, a play there. You're losing by 3 touchdowns every week. You're getting your back kicked in. You're not even close. But in their mind, we change this, we change that, we execute here, we execute there, and all of a sudden, we got a shot. I'll say this. You get some players back, and it could drastically change the way this thing looks, you know, from a competitive standpoint, not necessarily the outcome, but from a competitive standpoint, it could change the way that this thing looks. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in today's show. But Terry McLaurin getting back on the practice field in a physical capacity, which is why he made the trip to Madrid. He's gonna get his on-field work as he works back towards his ready-to-play process. And so DQ said this is great news. They feel good about where he is in the process. And, now we'll see how long it takes. Will Harris, they've been talking about him for the last 2 weeks and his progress. He has had his 21-day window officially opened. So now he is on the injury report. And I assume that this week, next week during the bye, and then you're going to potentially see Will Harris come back for the Denver game. And that would be a big boost to the secondary. That was a guy that they felt like communicated really well. I thought he flew around, and he also covers well. So he brings a lot of things to the table that we've lacked on the back end. And so it'll be really interesting to see if his presence makes a huge difference. Obviously, you're down a lot of players at this point, so don't know how much of a difference that's truly going to make, but we will see. It's better to have him out there than to not have him out there. I can say that at least. So you transition to in other news. We heard from DQ today. I just talked about some of the things that he spoke about. We also heard from starting quarterback Marcus Mariota. So we'll talk about what he had to say today after practice. But before we get into any of that, let's go ahead and take a look at the injury report for both teams, starting with the good guys. And as you can see, the first 3 names on the list did not make the trip to Madrid. They're all going to be out. Notice they did not put Treylon Burks on IR. They do not think this is going to be a very lengthy, injury recovery process. They said it was a minor surgery. Again, I'm not a big minor surgery guy. Surgery is surgery. Now, obviously, there are other surgeries that are way more dangerous and risky than others, but surgery, no matter how minor and insignificant it's made to be, is still invasive. They're still cutting your body open in some capacity to fix something. That's major to me. But Treylon Burks is not being placed on IR right now. They do have the luxury of the bye week taking place. And so he could be back after the bye for all we know. I highly doubt that, but he could be back as soon as week 13. Who knows? But he's out. Jaden's out, obviously, and Ale Cajo all out of this game. I don't know why Terry's not listed as out already. I mean, we know he's not playing. DQ told us that on Monday before they even left and boarded the plane to go to Madrid. So why he's not a part of the out crew already, I don't know. But Terry is listed as a DMP this on Wednesday, excuse me, but he's already out as well. And as we customarily get on a Wednesday, Zach Ertz, Laramie Tunzel, veteran rest days for those two. As I mentioned to you, Will Harris has now had his 21-day window open, so he's now going to be listed on the injury report from here on out until he is officially back with the ankle. So limited today for him, as you see. Frankie Louvu, we saw him get a little banged up on Sunday versus the Lions with a shoulder. He's limited. Quan Martin, we saw him get banged up as well with his shoulder. He's limited. I think that happened in the Seahawks game, as a matter of fact, last week. And then Chris Rodriguez left the game, did not return with the shoulder. He was a full go today. DQ said that he will play in the game on Sunday. So seems to be pretty good to go from that standpoint. And then Bobby Wagner, thumb, has been on the injury report the last 3 weeks with the thumb. He is a full participant. We know he's going to play. So again, a pretty harmless, injury report for the Commanders, considering that we knew about most of these injuries. Nothing here is jarring, nothing new here, shocking, or anything like that. We'll see what the Thursday injury report looks like, as this team just hopes to make it to the bye in one piece. You go to the ops in the Miami Dolphins. They have a pretty, very, harmless injury report as well. Offensive lineman Aaron Brewer and Rasul Douglas, one of their corners, did not practice today. Those are the only two that did not practice in some capacity. Rasul Douglas is important for them. They already are very thin, similar to us at the cornerback position. So him not being available this week, if in fact that isn't the case, would be a pretty big deal because they already don't have a lot of corners. But we'll monitor that. Much like us, if it's a Wednesday, you give that guy the day off. Rasul Douglas is a veteran, so he could have a Wednesday off, come back, practice Thursday and Friday, and be ready to go Sunday. We'll see what happens. Ashton Davis, safety. D. Eskridge, wide receiver. Ollie Gordon, interesting. He's been out since like week 6 versus the Jets with an ankle injury. You know what? I'm mixing up my teams. I don't think he's been out that long. With it, but he has been out for the last like 2 weeks with an ankle injury. I think I'm mixing him up with Braylon Allen, of the Jets, who's been out since like week 6 with an ankle injury. Ollie Gordon, I think, has been out for the last 2 weeks or so with an ankle. It'd be interesting to see if he can get back on the field. He's a big physical running back that they like to play off of Devin Achane. I'd actually prefer him to be back, because if he is, that's less Devin Achane touches, right? With Gordon out, Achane has just been pretty much the feature back. They really haven't put the rest of those carries that Gordon would have taken up, the 7 or 8 touches he would get. They haven't really given that to anyone else necessarily. So it's just more Devin Achane. I'd prefer to get someone else to eat some of those opportunities up for Devin Achane, because Ollie Gordon isn't breaking one for 67 yards and a touchdown. So I'd really prefer if Ollie Gordon were back in this game, to be brutally honest with you. But Julian Hill, tight end, Austin Jackson, offensive lineman, and Melifonwu and Chop Robinson all practice in some capacity, with Robinson practicing in full, everyone else practicing on a limited basis. And generally, if you practice on a Wednesday in some capacity, more likely than not, it's not always the case, but more likely than not, you're going to be able to go on Sunday. So again, this is a very, very non-threatening injury report for the Miami Dolphins coming into this contest. So let's get to what was said at the press conference today by DQ and Marcus Mariota. DQ started out the press conference thanking a bunch of people for their efforts, thanking Real Madrid for the hospitality. That's where they're practicing. I've been told by people that are there that the facility is beautiful. The space that, I mean, Real Madrid is like a $80 billion, machine. Of course, they've got state-of-the-art facilities, and it's probably really, really nice. I wouldn't think anything less of it, right? They're one of the premier football programs in the world, right? So yeah, I would imagine that those facilities are top notch. Soccer players or football players get paid on the level of baseball and basketball players in the States. So they get tons of money. That thing generates way more money than anything over here. So I would expect nothing less. Then he talked about the foundation of the team versus execution being the problem. And, DQ doesn't want to admit that there are any foundational cracks, that anything with the brotherhood or anything that they're doing inside the building isn't the right thing. Like, they've laid the foundation for what this team is going to be, and he's not going back on that. So you're not going to get him to admit, oh, we've got issues in the building. And from what I've been told by people is that there are no issues in the building. These guys they're upbeat. They're coming to work every day with their best foot forward. Everyone's positive, and they expect to turn this around, right? Whether that's actually true or not and going to happen, it's another story. But at least the working environment is one that isn't toxic, and guys aren't pointing fingers or anything like that. So he just decided to go with the execution being the problem. I think it's more so personnel at this point than it is the actual execution. Yeah, the execution hasn't been outstanding, but what are you going to expect from guys that weren't here when the season started, guys that you're bringing up from the practice squad, guys that you're signing to the 53-man roster that weren't on NFL rosters a month ago? Like, this is where we are. Like, DeMarcus Walker is probably going to play this week. We have no choice. We don't have any defensive ends that have an impact. Robbie Chosen is now a part of our 53-man roster. He wasn't on an NFL roster 3 weeks ago. Like, do you understand where we are right now? Like, we're a really desperate and bad team, from a roster standpoint. So, yeah, execution hasn't been great, obviously, but it's also just the fact that you just don't have the right personnel at this point. He talked about the challenges of the changes with guys being out. And he on the offensive side, he talked about alignment and the timing of plays, the depth of routes, which are all things that come with reps, which we've seen that play out, especially when Jaden's been in the lineup. We've seen him be inaccurate with guys because of the lack of reps and the lack of the feel of where a guy's going to come out of his break and what angle he's going to come out of his break at. And, the depth of these routes and the timing of everything, it's just been all off. And this is what happens when you have Treylon Burks in the lineup for the last 2 weeks. He finally gets into a rhythm with Mariota, and now he's out. Like, this is what we've dealt with all season. Terry's in there for a week. He's having success. Then he's out. Luke McCaffrey starting to become a fixture. Now he's out. Like, this has been our season thus far. He talked about defensively the challenges of communication when you got new guys in there. So now there's no Trey Amos, so now no Iguanagany, who is a healthy, active scratch, 2 out of the last 3 weeks, is now going to be starting on Sunday, more likely than not, because you're going to have Jonathan Jones on one side, probably going to have Mikey Sanders still on the outside on the other side, and you're going to have Noah Iguanagany inside as your nickel. So that's the state of our team right now. I talked about the Terry update that he gave already. He was then asked about his game day responsibilities. How are those going to change because he's calling the plays defensively now? Who's going to help him out? He's already been struggling with no responsibilities, with clock management, when to call timeouts, when to use a challenge, et cetera, et cetera. It's already been a struggle this season. And remember, I think it was Rico last night brought up Dave Gardy. We couldn't think of his name, but he said, they asked him who's going to be helping you with that. And he said, Dave Gardy and Brian Johnson are the guys that help him on game day, especially Brian Johnson has been helping him. I'm like, well, Brian's not doing a very good job, and maybe DQ has just been screwing the pooch on that. But if Brian Johnson's supposed to be the guy that was helping him with clock management, he hasn't been doing a very good job this year because the shit has just been awful this season. Dave Gardy is the rules analyst that they got from the NFL last year that was supposed to be a game changer, and it felt like it was last year. We were all over everything last year. Just hasn't been the case. He says those two guys will be tasked with the responsibility of keeping DQ on the straight and narrow during the game from a game management standpoint as he picks up more responsibilities calling plays. DQ was asked, why is this a good situation in terms of getting away, going to Madrid for a week? And he basically talked about, the brotherhood, them being able to spend time together. He's like, sometimes when you're in a closer proximity, when they're at home, the meetings are, everyone's segmented. You're with your group, you're with your position group. They're not all together. This is an all together environment. They're spending a lot more time with each other. And, that helps. He talked about Duran's absence and that his absence is going to be felt, but he also took that opportunity to go off on a Johnny Newton tangent because Johnny Newton will be starting in place of Daron Payne. And maybe we're going to get a look at what it's going to look like next year because I don't think Daron Payne is going to be back next year. We've already talked about his number on the final year of his contract. It's not one that I think the team is going to be willing to eat. There aren't very many guarantees on his contract, so they can get out of the deal. I don't see them paying Daron over $20 million next year on the final year of his deal. I see it being a Jonathan Allen situation where they'll try to trade him. No one's going to bite, and they're going to have to release him just like they did Jonathan Allen. And so maybe this is an opportunity for us to kind of look and see what life without Daron Payne is like, life after Daron, because we really don't get to see it because Daron doesn't miss time, right? Coincidentally enough, in the biggest game of our damn season, and really the biggest game we've played in over 30 years, Daron Payne wasn't available. That is like so Commanders if I've ever seen a Commanders thing, right? Like, this guy never misses time. In the biggest game of the season, he can't go, and we have to endure, I'm not going to say his name, 65% of the snaps. So Johnny Newton is going to get an opportunity. DQ said that they're excited for Johnny. He's dealt with a myriad of injuries. Last year, he had surgery, in the offseason after the draft, and he never really fully got to himself. They felt like he, was coming into camp in great shape, yada, yada, yada. And he had another injury that kind of set him back, but they feel like he's playing well, and they expect him to show up in this game. Okay. So you say, I'll be looking for a Johnny Newton play or 2 or 3 in this game with the extended look and all of the snaps that he will be getting. Marcus Mariota impact, DQ was asked about. And, I've felt Mariota's impact each of the last 2 years. Last year, it was more in that mentorship role with Jaden. You remember the hey, get up, get your win, go use your God-given ability to win us the game against Atlanta. You just could feel his impact on Jaden in his rookie season. This year, I'm feeling his impact as a leader because he's had to play so much this year. He's been a voice of reason. Like that whole quote about we aren't who we think we are, that's some real shit. And they need to hear that. And Mariota has been one of those guys to deliver that message. And I also heard this somewhere. I don't know where, but Mariota basically said, I've been every guy in the locker room. I've been a top pick. I've been a, relied upon starter. I've been injured. I've been on the bench. I've been in a backup role. I've been on the practice squad, as a guy, not the practice squad, but a guy that was, playing scout team, basically. I've been in everybody's shoes in this locker room, just about. And he can speak to that. And I think that resonates with a lot of players. So he's had a tremendous impact this year, has Marcus Mariota, from a leadership standpoint. He's one of the guys that I think, in a season like this that feels lost, you need veteran leadership like Bobby Wagner and Marcus Mariota and Zach Ertz. You need those type of guys to hold this shit together, because you can easily see how a Javon Kinlaw, and not to say that Javon Kinlaw is a bad dude or Duran's a bad dude. Those guys were in the heat of the battle and they lost their shit for a little while, and that shit happens. But you can easily see how in a lost season, how young guys could be like, man, F this shit. I don't give a, and it could just go off the rails. And Marcus is like, I'm not seeing that. And part of the reason we're not seeing that is because of guys like Bobby Wagner, because of guys like Zach Ertz, because of guys like Marcus Mariota. DQ talked about addressing the frustration. We saw the blow-ups last week. Kawhi Martin, Javon Kinlaw, and Deron Payne. And he said, I addressed that immediately. That's not something you can let fester and settle. You got to address that immediately. So he said he took care of that at halftime. And then he gave us a C-Rod injury update, which we've already talked about as well. Marcus Mariota spoke, and, it was pretty brief. He talked about the Madrid experience and how, lovely it's been, and how it's been a breath of fresh air for the team. And same thing, DQ kind of talked about them just needing to get away and needing to bond. And this Madrid experience has definitely helped in that way. He talked about what has been the what has he learned about this team this year. And I think this was the most profound thing I've heard Mariota say pretty much all season, because these are the things that have plagued us this season. And like I said, Mariota has said a lot of profound, impactful shit, because he's one of those veterans that has seen it all, done it all, and understands like what it takes to be successful, but what it looks like when it's not, and how you can fall into that rut, because he's been on a lot of teams that haven't been successful. And so he talked about the details, and the little things always matter. And he said you could be in the third quarter, in the middle of the third quarter on a drive, and you don't focus in on your detail and on a third down, and now you have to punt. And you don't think about it in that moment about how big of a deal that is, but it is very significant in the grand scheme of things. And we see that all the time with this team. We'll get to a 3rd and 2, and then we'll have a false start. We'll get to a 2nd and 2, and then we'll have a holding penalty, or we'll have an illegal formation, right, that sets us back. And it's just the little things, the attention to detail, that can derail a drive. And we seem to do that more this year than we did at any point last year. And unlike last year, where we were able to overcome those shortcomings, even if we did have a penalty, we could overcome it with our offense. We're not in that position right now. And so it's so important to just hone in on the smaller, granular details. And he talked about that. He talked about the musical chairs at the wide receiver position and how difficult that can be to adjust to as a quarterback. Treylon Burks in the huddle this week. Now he's not next week. Luke McCaffrey in the huddle 2 weeks ago. Now he's not in the huddle. Terry McLaurin in the huddle. Now he's not in the huddle. How do you deal with that? And he said what this staff has done a really good job of is giving everyone reps, so that when we get into game situations, it's not this, foreign thing throwing a football to this guy. I've thrown it to him in practice. So I guess when you've got as many receivers rotating in the mix as we've had this season, you got to have all these guys getting reps. You don't know who the hell is going to have to play this week. So that's what he talked about with the wide receiver position. Then Mariota said, he was asked about the quote, I don't think we are who we think we are. And he was asked to expound upon that. And basically he said, look, we're 3-7, bro. No one envisioned us being 3-7 before the season started. 10 weeks, through the season heading into week 11. Like, that's just not who we thought we were going to be. And we can't keep conducting ourselves like we're 7-3. And not to say that they're not putting in the work that is necessary to turn things around, et cetera, but you have to be, and I've talked about this for the last month, basically, specifically the last 3 weeks in particular, leading up to the trade deadline, post-trade deadline, and now heading into week 11, like, you have to live in your truth. When we got embarrassed by Seattle, that was pretty much the beginning of the end of the season. You really needed to win that game. And not only did you not win that game, you weren't even competitive in that game. You didn't even look like an NFL team in that game. So you have to start living in your truth. It was at that moment that you should have said, all right, how many of these guys can we get rid of and acquire draft capital for the future, because this is over. They're not looking at it that way, though. That's a fan perspective. That's not a team organizational perspective. That's just how I felt. But Mariota is basically saying, we're not who we thought we were going to be this season, and we have to own that. And in order for us to get back on track, we have to live with the reality of, you're 3-7, bro. You are what your record says you are. You've lost by 21 points or more each of the last 4 weeks. Like, this is who you are. So embrace that, lean into it, and understand it. You can't just be a little bit better. You got to be a whole hell of a lot better if you're going to turn this shit around. Who the hell are you beating playing the way you've played over the last month? The answer is nobody. So, again, more profound shit from Marcus Mariota. So, with that said, now we are going to take our first look at the Miami Dolphins. Before we do that, though, we're going to get a word from our sponsor, Sleeper. We'll come back on the other side, and we'll get to the Dolphins and our first look at the game over in Madrid. Sleeper is the best way to experience and connect over sports together. It's a one-stop shop for all of your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat in the games in real time with other users, get the fastest scores, blazing fast news and alerts right at your fingertips. Play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. So enjoy sports the way they were meant to, together. Download the #1 sports app today. Predict the hottest football stats like passing yards, receiving yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and much more to cash in on your daily fantasy football skills. Use promo code LTN and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Sleeper. So now we're taking our first look at the Miami Dolphins, and I really want to stress to you at this current moment that there is a very, very real possibility that the Commanders win on Sunday. I hope you guys are aware of this. Yes, I know we stink. Yes, I know defensively we can't stop anybody. And this Dolphins team have explosive players that are capable of doing exactly what we saw JSN do to us, what Jameson Williams did to us, what Jahmyr Gibbs did to us. They have the type of players that can replicate that and turn this into a blowout, just like those games were, right? So I am fully aware of this, but I am also fully aware of the fact that those are 2 7-win teams, or the Dolphins or the Seahawks are a 7-win team, and the Seahawks or the Lions are a 6-win team. Like, those are 2 of the best teams in the conference, 2 of the better teams in the league currently. This Dolphins team is 3-7, just like us. They're no better than us. They have more talent than we do, but they're not better than us. They're a train wreck just like we are. And Tua is a shit show onto himself. I would tell you that after Geno Smith, Tua Tagovailoa is the next most volatile starting quarterback in the NFL. You don't know what Tua is going to show up. If we get the Tua that showed up against the Falcons a few weeks back, we're in trouble. We get the Tua that showed up against the Browns. We're not the Browns defensively, I am aware. But it doesn't take much for Tua to turn it over 2 or 3 times in a game. So again, like Tua is so volatile that he could easily throw the football to us 2 or 3 times. Will we catch it? Don't know. But Tua is so skittish and erratic that you don't know which one's going to show up. So I'm just here to tell you, there's a very realistic chance that the team wins on Sunday. And then you have to ask yourself, then what? What comes after a Commanders win? That's a scary proposition for some of you who want to see this team with a high-level draft pick. Because you got to remember, they got to 3-7 for a reason. Now they're playing much better football here of late. They've won 2 out of their last 3 games. So they're not the same Dolphins team that was a train wreck earlier in the season, but they could easily return to that. They could easily return to that. They're not a consistent team. They make a lot of mistakes just like we do. And their quarterback is the type of quarterback that we've thrived against in the past. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That being said, back to reality of we haven't stopped anybody in a month. The defense has gotten worse. Now, Dan Quinn is calling the plays. We have to see what that looks like. I don't think many of us believe that that's going to change anything based off of the personnel and what he has to deal with. But all I'm saying to you is they've got the weapons to do what the other teams have done. And until we see improvement from this defense, we have to assume after a month of getting our teeth kicked in, you have to assume that it's going to continue until it doesn't. Okay? The first time that I think there's a chance that we don't have to worry about someone offensively kicking our teeth in is the Giants. Because I don't think they have the talent to do it. Even if Jackson Dart, which he should be healthy by the time we see them, they don't have any receivers. I know Darius Slayton can kick our ass, but he's not on the level of a JSN, a Jalen Waddle, or a Jameson Williams or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, he can beat us, but he's not a guy that strikes fear into our hearts. Wan'Dale Robinson is more of an underneath receiver. He can hurt you, and he does kill us. He's the guy that I'm more concerned with when we play the Giants than even Malik Neighbors, because we can't cover Wan'Dale Robinson. But he's running, 7-8 yard routes. He's not running the routes 25, 30 yards down the field. So I'm not as afraid of the Giants, from a skill position standpoint right now with the way they're constructed. But this Dolphins team scares the shit out of me because they've got 2 explosive, dynamic players that can hurt us. They've got a tight end in Greg Dulcich that can run as well. And again, if Tua's locked in, he's a master distributor. If Tua is not locked in, and you'll know very early on in the game if Tua's locked in or not. He usually shows who he is very early in a football game. If he lets one rip and it sails, okay, we got a shot today. If he throws one behind the target that's wide open and he hits him with one of these, hey, my bad, we got a shot today. If he rips one over the middle of the field early in the game, in stride, and it's a catch and run for 27 yards, SpaghettiOs, we could be in some trouble. So this is going to be an interesting game because for the first time in a month, in 3 weeks since the Cowboys game, I actually think because I didn't think we were going to win the Cowboys game. I said it would be a miracle, but I still think I picked us to win somehow, some way. But that didn't feel real. Like, just going into that game with what we had, it didn't feel like we were going to win. But you still had a chance because Dallas stunk so bad on defense. This is the first time since the Dallas game, though, that I really think we have a shot to win. I didn't think we were beating Kansas City. I didn't think we were beating Seattle, even though I picked us to win. But that was more off of just the strength of the championship jerseys and Art Monk night and just the energy that was going to be in that building and just hoping that that whole atmosphere was going to, carry this team to a level that they just simply don't have, right? This is different. Like, from a play standpoint, I look at Miami and I'm like, oh, we can beat them. We have a shot. I don't think we're going to beat them, but this isn't like the last 3 weeks in particular, where it's like, we got no shot against Kansas City. Seattle's better than us too. And Detroit's going to absolutely stomp a mud hole in us. This isn't that. Okay. The Dolphins aren't an elite team. They stink just like us. And they make mistakes just like we do. That's why they're 3-7. So I say all of that to say this. If the Dolphins play at their best and we play at our best, they beat us. Okay. If they play at their best and we play at our best, they beat us because they have more talent right now. But one of these two teams isn't going to play at their best. One of these two teams isn't going to do it. And if it happens to be Miami, we got a shot. I mean, both of these teams could not play at their best. What am I saying, right? Anyway, let's get to the comment section and then we'll get out of here real quick. John Perez, thank you for being a member for 21 months. Who writes, honestly, Lou, Quinn needs to stop with the delusional saving the season, bringing Jaden and Terry back talk. Shut them down and embrace the tank. Get that top 3 to 5 pick and draft the blue chip defensive end. It's not happening, JP. And it's not happening for all of the reasons that I've outlined over the last, week or so, which is DQ's fighting for his life, man. Like, he's not going to take for granted that, oh, okay, I took him to the NFC Championship game. I'm not getting fired if we don't win another game this season. I'm cool with 12 straight losses. They're cool with 12 straight losses. I'm good at 3-14, and my job is safe at 3-14. He can't be assured of that. You can't keep losing and look Josh Harris and these investors in their face and tell them that everything's okay when the product on the field says otherwise. So, like, they're not embracing it. Like, that's a fan thing. Embracing the tank and all of that shit. That's a fan, objective. And that's a fan initiative. That is not an organization. Those guys come to work every day, spend 9-10 hours at the facility. You really think they're trying to lose? They don't give a shit about what we're talking about. They're trying to win football games. Dan Quinn is trying to win football games. And you best believe at this point, if you haven't already acknowledged the fact that they're bringing Jaden back, and I don't know where you've been and you've been under a rock, but they're bringing him back. It doesn't matter if he's not able to go in week 13 versus Denver, but he's able to come back the following week versus the Giants. He's playing at some point this season. They're not shutting down Jaden Daniels unless he has some sort of re-aggravation or some kind of, a setback with his rehab. He's coming back this season. So you can take that and put that out of your mind. Terry's coming back. Clearly, they had a chance to put him on IR and they haven't done it. So all of that talk of they should do this, they should do that, it clearly isn't happening. They're going to put these guys back on the field. And we're going to talk about this later on tonight. But, like, they don't see the season being over. They don't see the season being over. A win this week against the Dolphins, who the hell knows what could happen? I can tell you this. I've felt this way before, and we've seen things turn around. Totally different scenario, totally different situation. But trust me, as a fan of this team, if you've been a fan of this team long enough, you've seen stranger things happen. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So anyway, I digress. Yes, I get it. It's not going to happen. I'm just saying, stranger things have happened. Michael, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Michael writes, hate saying it, but honestly, want to just lose out, not making the playoffs. Obviously, then just going to have a middle-of-the-pack draft pick if we win some more games. And that is the fear. And that is exactly what's going to happen. And you know it, just like I know it, Michael. That's exactly what's going to happen here, is they're going to end up 5-12, which will get you the 8th, 9th, 10th pick in the draft, which is not bad, but it's not as good as what it could be if you end up being 4-13 this season or 3-14. But they're going to win at least 5 games. I'm telling you right now, they're going to win at least 5 games. Let them beat the Dolphins, and they could easily win 6 or 7 games to finish this thing up. Because there's a real possibility that the Eagles don't need the Week 18 game. You can still beat the Giants. The Vikings aren't hot shit. Like, there's games there. Cowboys aren't a good football team either, right? Like there are winnable games on this schedule still remaining. Like for as bad as this team is, we're still playing bad teams. The Cowboys are not a good team. The Giants are not a good team. The Dolphins are not a good team. We're not a good team. I'm aware of that, but I'm just saying, like, these are not good football teams right now. They're very beatable. And if you catch them on the day where they're playing some of their worst football, you can win. So, Michael, we know how this is going to go. We're going to win 2 or 3 more games this season. And we're going to end up with the 13th pick. We're going to end up with the 11th pick. We're going to end up, because we always do. We never end up like, I shouldn't say never, because we've had the number 2 pick on multiple occasions with Chase Young and Jaden Daniels. So we've had the number 2 overall pick before on 2 occasions. But that's like the season has to absolutely fall apart for that to take place. Like you've got to be firing your coach that year. We knew Ron was getting fired in 2023. They fired Jay in 2019. That's how the season has to go in order to end up with the number 2 pick. That is not how this season is going to go, and it's not how this season is going to end. You know it, I know it, and this team isn't going to quit. And that's what is required of getting a top 3 pick. The team has to quit. The coach has to be fired, and that is not going to happen, Michael. It's not going to happen. VGK 0803, thank you for being a member for 11 months. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. So that was our first look at the Dolphins. We'll talk more about them, the game, and go behind enemy lines tomorrow on the show. But I will return a little bit later on tonight to promote the Commanders Kings being live on Sunday morning. Watching the game with you guys. We're going to be live. It's going to be a party, man. Let's call it what it is. It's a party because whether the game is good or not, we're going to have a great time. Okay. We want all of you guys there. The goal is to try to have over 3,000 people in the chat watching the game with us. That's the goal. Like really turn up, have a great time, turn it into one big ass party on Sunday morning. So I'll be promoting that a little bit later on, but I also want to talk about the overall state of the organization. And I just want to get a feel for where you guys think we are, because I think where I feel like we are and where you feel like we are, we're not that far apart, but I do think we see it a little bit differently, right? So I do want to talk about that a little bit later on. So we will come back and do that a little bit later on tonight. But until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a great rest of your evening, and I look forward to chopping it up with you guys later on tonight. Until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys take care. God bless. Good night.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap. Hand to Riggins. Good hold. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20. He's